So hey guys, welcome back to another video. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about something that we're all going to have to experience at some point in our life, but something that's of course very difficult to deal with, and that's grief. How do we deal with grief? How do we manage grief? Now, the key thing for me is it's very individual. So what I'm going to be doing in this video is sharing with you a couple of my own personal experiences, and at the same time walk you through what helped me. What helped me in those moments where I desperately missed that person, when I couldn't really see myself moving forward without them being in my life. And at the same time, I'm going to share with you a couple of other longer term strategies that have helped me manage it over time as well. But before we dive in, it's time for coffee. Okay, so cheers. We need coffee before we talk about grief. But grief, and before I talk about the practical sides of you dealing with grief or managing grief, if you are grieving right now over someone that you've loved, I want to firstly talk about my own personal experiences, because like I said, grief is very personal. And before I say, hey, do this, do that, this can help, I think it's important that we start this video, if you don't know who I am, with my own journey of grief and my own personal experience. You can kind of see where I'm coming at it from. Now, my first experience of grief that really stands out to me, other than the loss of obviously great-grandparents, I was very fortunate. I didn't really have much grief early on in my life, but when I was 18, nearly 19 years old, I lost my dad, and I lost my dad to suicide. Now, with that grief came, I believe, almost grief with the volume turned up. Grief is very difficult to deal with, but with my dad's suicide came a lot of unanswered questions. It came the question of why, and trying to answer that and struggling to answer that. There came a misunderstanding around suicide. There was times where I felt guilty. I blamed my dad. I was ashamed of it as well. I didn't want to talk about how he obviously died as well because of the shame and the stigma around suicide. At the same time, with suicide and my misunderstanding around it, I believe that my dad made a choice. And because he had made that choice, I should just move on as quickly as possible because my dad didn't want to be here anymore. But with time and with therapy and with lots of kind of, working on that, I realize now that, my dad felt like he was a burden to everyone. My dad felt like he was a burden to the people that he loved. My dad was entrapped in that tunnel vision of do I continue to fight this mental pain or do I end it, because I cannot deal with what I'm going through anymore. I know that my dad was very unwell, right? My dad did not want to die. My dad did not want to take his own life, but he couldn't see any way out of that pain. He couldn't see any way out of dealing with what he was going through right then. But suicide grief was very difficult to deal with, and I'll touch on that in this video. Then, of course, another example of I lost my nan a month after my dad, and looking back on that experience now, I don't think I grieved over my nan. I was close with my nan, but I don't think I grieved over her because I was too busy grieving about my dad, right? I remember my nan's funeral. Like I say, this is my dad's mum. Literally sitting there, same place that my dad had his funeral in, just thinking about my dad, and I struggled to grieve over my nan, and I think that came a little bit later on. And then one more example before we move on is my brother, right? And grief can come in different forms. My brother is still alive today, and I'm very grateful for that. But 3 years ago, my brother experienced an accident at work, which left him with an extreme traumatic brain injury. And my brother spent 11.5 months in hospital. He was, of course, very touch and go at the beginning, spent time in a coma. And yeah, my brother's amazing, right? My brother is an inspiration to me. So is my mum, because my mum's been there by his side every single day since that day happened. But I had to grieve over that as well, because my brother, even though, as I say, is still alive today, mentally my brother is the same brother that I've always had, the same rubbish sense of humor, remembers everything. But physically, my brother is now in a wheelchair. Physically, he has to go physio every single day to try and obviously recover. And there was, of course, a period where I've been grieving over the loss of the brother that I once had, right? Of course, I still have my brother here today, but I'm grieving over that person that was once there. So you might be able to relate to that as well. Grief comes in various different forms, and we have to know how to deal with it. So what's the first thing that I recommend that you do if you are grieving right now? The first thing is a simple one, but sometimes it's as easy as grabbing yourself a plain notepad and a pen. Now you may have heard of journaling before. I've done videos on this in the past, and you can see my youngest, my toddler, has been scribbling in my journal. Beautiful drawings, boy. But journaling for me was a massive help early on, and I want to explain why. So I was once told to journal about 2 years after my dad's suicide, and trust me when I say this, it didn't feel easy when it came to journaling, because I felt like I was writing a diary, right? And I was journaling on a daily basis. So I'm just gonna put the date up the top here now. And I wanna just explain what journaling means to me and how you can find it beneficial. Now you'll probably hear people say you have to talk about your grief, you have to talk about how you're feeling, but talking about it is very difficult in the early stages. So what I find is grabbing yourself a plain notepad to begin with, and literally there's no structure to this. That's what I found the most beneficial, zero structure to this. I would literally sit there, I would write down the date, and then I would just start writing whatever was on my mind, right? So I would start to put whatever was up here onto a blank piece of paper. Now with journaling, the main thing is zero judgment. I would literally just write whatever's on your mind. It can be messy, it doesn't have to be, you know, good handwriting as you can probably see there. It doesn't have to be any structure. If you are struggling, I would tend to advise you to write "today I am feeling" as the first sentence. Today I am feeling, and then you can start to, whatever comes out, you can start to just write whatever comes out. You can then say "yesterday I felt." And again, that kind of gets you to self-reflect on the day before, or this week I've been feeling. And I would just say, like I say, write down whatever comes to your mind. There's no right or wrong answers here. Now the reason that I like journaling is because it's really important to express how we feel. Whenever we suppress emotions, you know, I suppressed the emotions of my dad for probably about 1.5 years, 2 years before I really did anything about it. And I suppressed them and I distracted myself with those short-term hits of fulfillment, you know, going and buying a nice car, you know, starting a business, overworking, drinking most weekends. And that only lasts a certain amount of time before that grief resurfaces and punches you in the face. So what journaling almost allows you to do is still express yourself, but it's not as uncomfortable in a way as sitting there in front of someone, making eye contact with them, telling them how you're feeling, getting it off your chest. And what me and a piece of paper, you and a piece of paper allows you to do is, as I say, still allow you to express how you're feeling and get those emotions out, but at the same time do it in a more comfortable way. And the other key thing that really helps with journaling is if you are someone who is really good at giving someone advice. So if, let's say, a friend of yours is grieving, they've just lost someone, and you feel like you know the advice to give them, but when it comes to your own situation, you now grieving, and you're terrible at taking that own advice, journaling again is almost a way of getting those 50 to 70,000 thoughts every single day that we have down on a piece of paper, looking at them, rationalizing them, coming up with solutions, and then it becomes more clearer. Our minds become clearer. There's definitely a weight that's been lifted off our shoulders. But of course, you know, journaling isn't a quick fix. You know, I started when I was about 21, so it took me a couple of years to start doing it. But looking back now, kind of 9 years later, definitely journaling was a massive part of my grieving process. So I would recommend that you write down on a daily basis, maybe in the morning, maybe in the night, just how you're feeling. Keep it to yourself. If you want, maybe you can write something and share it with a loved one if you don't feel like you can talk about it to them at this current stage. I would definitely recommend writing it down. However awkward it feels at the beginning, writing it down can really help you grieve. Tip number 2 is to practice mindfulness. But before I walk you through how it works, I just want to show you this really quickly. What are you doing, boy? A brand new addition to the McGregor family. This is Rocky. You know, boy? He likes to stay in the sun. And as all good dogs do, they are also very mindful, aren't you, boy? Hey, come. Oh, leave me alone, Dad. I'm chilling, I'm sunbathing. Good boy, good boy. Anyway, let's talk about mindfulness. So, there's a huge amount of myths around mindfulness. Lots of people believe that mindfulness is you sitting in a corner of a room, maybe listening to wow music. You know, there's a real misconception that mindfulness is meditation. Now, meditation is of course one form of mindfulness, but there's various different ways that we can be mindful throughout the day. And when we are dealing with grief, being mindful is really important, because Typically, from my own experience, when I was really struggling with grief, I was too busy living in the past. When I was living in the past, it led to depression, it led to guilt, it led to the feeling of loss and missing that person, because my mind was drifting off to the past and I wanted to control that. I wanted to experience that again. I wanted to see, that person that I just lost one more time. Then at the same time, my mind was drifting off to the future, right? As my dad as an example, it led to a lot of anxiety, a lot of worry, a lot of stress. I remember looking outside the window one day and just thinking to myself, I'm never going to get married. I am never going to get married without my dad being there. I am never going to have kids because my dad will never be a granddad and my kids will never meet my dad. And that constant living in the past, living in the future is hard to deal with because we're simply trying to control something that we have no control over. So mindfulness can come in a variety of different forms, but first thing that I would say is there's a lot of recommendations out there when it comes to trying to stay present, and that's what I believe mindfulness is all about. It's being present in that moment. And of course, Eckhart Tolle has an amazing book called The Power of Now. This here is practicing the power of now, which is a little bit more actionable. And I think this paragraph really summarizes the importance of staying present when we are dealing with grief. It says, the past cannot survive in your presence. Whatever you need to know about the unconscious past in you, the challenges of the present will bring it out. If you delve into the past, it will become a bottomless pit. There is always more. You may think that you need more time to understand the past or become free of it. In other words, that the future will eventually free you of the past. This is delusion. Only the present can free you of the past. More time cannot free you of time. Access the power of now, that is key. And really being present and focusing on the now moment, because that's the only thing that we can control, is a very almost simplistic approach, and we often overcomplicate things. And of course, being present and staying in the now is also one of the most difficult things that we can always do. But if we think about mindfulness, right, there are lots of different ways to stay mindful. For me, going out for a run is my mindfulness because it's me out there running. Me and my dad used to run a lot together. It's a very mindful activity for me. For lots of other people, it could be reading, right? I'm also reading this book at the moment, again, Unevered Soul by Michael Singer. It could be sitting down, grabbing a book, reading that book, and at the same time, just kind of diving into it. It's a very mindful activity because all it is me and a book. It could be meditation, it could be coloring, it could be doing puzzles, it could be cooking, it could be playing golf. There are so many ways that we can be mindful. It could be going for a walk and just experiencing what's around you, using your senses to really take it in and center yourself, ground yourself into the present moment. Because believe me when I say this, when our mind is too concerned with the past, when our mind is too fixated on the future, is an exhausting place to be. But the benefits of mindfulness will not be experienced unless we practice it, unless we embed it into a morning routine, a daily routine. Yes, you might do it and you might feel a little bit better, of course, but for us to really get that clarity, we have to practice mindfulness potentially on a daily basis. Don't judge yourself if you miss a day, right? But try and embed it into your morning routine, your nighttime routine, just some form of mindfulness that's individual to you, that's something that you can easily do. You might already do it, right? And you need to focus on that because we want to try and stay present in these moments. The third tip to deal with grief is to speak to people that have had a similar experience. There really comes a time when we are struggling to deal with what we're dealing with and our mind almost tells us that we're alone, right? It tells us that we have to deal with this on our own, no one understands what we're going through. But there is some real almost peace in speaking to other people that have been through something similar. Now, that grief typically has maybe been experienced by someone that you know, and it's important that maybe you reach out to them because trust me when I say this, speaking to someone with personal experience is really effective in your recovery. Now, if you don't feel comfortable to speak to someone, or if you don't know anyone that's maybe been through what you've been through, I would highly recommend that you also maybe look at some books that can maybe help you understand based upon people's personal experience. You could join some groups, some communities. There are lots out there, physical communities, Facebook groups, online communities that are there with people with their own experiences that have been through something in the past, that have been through something similar, that you can ask advice from. People that have maybe been in the place that you're in right now, but they're maybe 5 or 6 years down the line, and they can look and give you some advice, give you some of their feedback based upon what's helped them. And that's what I'm trying to do in this video here, right? But you know, this book to me was actually quite helpful. It's dying to be free, a healing guide for families after suicide. It's not a popular book. I think my mum got it actually, and then I read it. But the reason why I actually found this helpful is because it's written by people that have had that experience, right? And it's got a lot of personal story in there as well. And that helped. Also, you know, my book, right? You know, when I wrote this, a lot of this come down to the journaling that I was doing and trying to put down how I was feeling in that time. And this book got published, I think it was about 2 years ago now, Man Up, Man Down, which really looks at my dad's suicide, how I dealt with that, the journey after that, the bottling of it up, you know, my experiences with therapy. And even though, again, you know, the book for me, there was no reason for this to be a huge book and sell loads. All I wanted to do with this book is help one person. And I still have people reach out to me today to say that because of the personal element behind it, it has helped them deal with the loss of someone to suicide as well. So the third tip for me is really, really try and speak to people with the personal experience, because believe me, it will make you feel less alone. Tip number 4 is look at that lion. Tip number 4 is exercise, looking after your physical health during these difficult periods. So, should we go for a run? I'm halfway through the run and I wanted to take you to somewhere quite special for me, and it really ties in with this video today talking about grief, and it's that right there. As we approach this memorial bench, it's been here for 11 years now, you're going to see my dad here, Neil Stephen McGregor, the day he was born to the day that he obviously took his own life, as I've mentioned. I've got my family dog Charlie, who we lost in 2017, my mum's companion, you know, and again, we're talking about grief, doesn't always have to be a human as well. And then obviously on this side, guys, we've got my amazing nan and Peggy Fred McGregor, which Fred was my granddad's nickname for my nan. And you can obviously see it's a little bit worn down. We actually made this bench, me and my granddad, together with the ranger, the park ranger over here. But it's an amazing place to just come, sit, relax, and obviously you can kind of see I've got that for a view as well. But yeah, you know, sitting here taking a little bit of a breather from that run, which is of course, you know, great for your mental health. And as well, when it comes to grieving, we don't put ourselves first, we don't put our physical health, our well-being first, but it's just about getting outside, it's just about walking for 10 minutes or doing some form of exercise, because believe me, it does make you feel better. But you know, sitting here, you know, on my dad's memorial bench, it makes me think about grief even more. The fact that I used to come over here a lot more after my dad had just passed. You know, I used to come over here, I would, you know, cry over here. I would bring a book sometimes and sit here for an hour. I would bring a notepad and I would write down ideas, business ideas, visions and plans for the future. You know, I used to sometimes get emotional when I brought my kids here, and I would sometimes, you know, talk to my dad, talk to my nan. And there was a time as well where I felt guilty for not coming over here, guilty for not coming and spending time here, you know, because I felt like I had to. But that's the thing that I've learned with grief, is I don't have to be sitting here to be in the presence of my dad. You know, I don't have to be sitting here to know that my dad is looking over me. My dad is, you know, always with me, because I've learned so much from him, and I'm so grateful that I had an amazing dad in my life for the first 18 years of my life, and I've learned a lot of lessons from him. I've learned a lot from this grief, and
it's difficult to say that, you know, and I would never have said that shortly afterwards, but looking back and reflecting on it, if there's one thing that I've learned, is you can get through this. You can get through those dark times, and that adversity, that grief that you're experiencing right now will make you stronger. It will make you a stronger person. But yeah, my old man, my nan, my granddad wants to come over here. My granddad's 95. My mum, I think, wants to come over here. You know, this little bench here, area right here, it's going to be a special place for us all. But this was a place that my dad used to run, right? Me and my dad used to do running circuits all the way around this field, and that's why this is special to us. We wanted it here, somewhere that we could go, and yeah, back to running. Love you, Dad. Love you, Dad. So, just finished up the run. Didn't go very far, but that's the key thing when you are focusing on your physical health, your well-being, when you're grieving. Please don't put any pressure on it. Just see how your body feels, but really focusing on exercise, getting outside, trying to eat the right foods, you know, 60%, 70% of the time, making sure that you're trying to sleep as best as you possibly can. I can't stress enough the importance of putting yourself first and proactively looking after your physical health, your well-being during these difficult times. Because one thing that I learned was, you know, I was in self-sabotage mode, right? Alcohol, you know, not really exercising, getting myself deeper and deeper into that dark hole of depression and not really knowing how I'm going to deal with this. So really for me, you know, focusing on your physical well-being is super, super important.
Hey there, I'm Dave Bono, host of the Hey House Medieval podcast.
And then the final tip that I would advise to anyone who's struggling with grief would be to talk about it. And when it comes to talking about it, as I've already said, it could be finding someone with a similar experience to you. It could be surrounding yourself with the people that you need around you at that specific time. And I think when we lose someone, when we're dealing with grief, when we're struggling, we do feel like we have to battle it alone sometimes, and that isn't the truth. You know, try and spend as much time with people that can build you up, that can support you, people that are willing to help, and please don't be afraid to ask for help during these difficult times. And then also as well, you know, one thing that really helped me was therapy. And of course therapy is very different for everyone else, and there's different experiences, but one thing that I would say with therapy in my own experience was keep at it. You know, I went to see a therapist I think it was a couple of weeks after my dad's suicide, and it was on the doctor's surgery, and it didn't really work. It wasn't maybe the right time. And then I went to another therapist about a year after that. The lady who helped me, Anne, happened about 2 or 3 years after, you know, my dad's suicide. But therapy really allowed me to talk about it openly and to get it off my chest and to start to work through it. You know, rather than ignoring it, let's face it head on. Let's work through this grief, because if I continue to ignore it, it's only going to get worse. So please, the final piece of advice that I'd give you is talk about it and surround yourself with the right people. If you've enjoyed this video, then please let me know. As I said, hopefully these tips have been helpful. Hopefully my personal experience has been helpful as well. If you are struggling with grief right now, like I've said to you, it can get better. And I used to hate when people said time's a healer, but trust me, we do learn in a way to manage it as better as we possibly can. So guys, if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to subscribe for more videos like this. Drop me a comment down below, and I'll see you all in another video very soon.